left side or the right side, then it must be the FinSide. It ain't the left side.
Thank you, Solo D. Welcome to another episode of On the FinSide, and here we are getting into the regular season. The Miami Dolphins travel to Seattle to take on the Seattle Seahawks. We're going to talk about that matchup, but first, follow us on the FinSide on Facebook, on Twitter, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also, if you have a question, we'll read it on the air. So we have a very, very special guest with us here. Looking at the Seahawks, it seems like it's the typical year for both the Seahawks and the Dolphins compared to last year. We'll go down position by position. At the quarterback spot, Russell Wilson in his final 7 or 8 games really took that game for the few years of his career. How much more can Russell Wilson improve?
It's one of those things where we need to see from Russ, if Wilson can continue to give that consistent, quick read, get the ball out of his hand, especially early in games.
Looking at the running back spot, obviously Marshawn Lynch is no longer with Seattle. Thomas Rawls was a star when he got the chance last year and has had some injury problems here this preseason. Christine Michael, who was drafted by the Seahawks, released by the Seahawks, and back with them at the end of last year, is expected to get the start with C.J. Prosise and Alex Collins, 2 rookies behind him. How much can we expect to see Christine Michael in the game? Should we expect him to be the bell cow, or do you expect those rushes to be a little bit more divvied out?
Well, they're going to be a little bit divvied out because Rawls is healthy, but he's not 100% back. He broke his ankle last year, had some ligament damage, had to have surgery. So it's just a slow process. He's healthy, but the team wants to bring him along. So I expect him to get probably about 15 snaps, 8 carries, somewhere in there. The rest of the carries are all going to go to Christine Michael. We'll see Prosise as the third down back guy who will block, run some routes out of the backfield, that kind of stuff. But he probably won't get more than one or two carries, and those will be, a draw on third. And it's really going to come down to that. You're going to see Christine Michael get the bulk of them. Rawls is going to get his share as they work him back. I'd be willing to bet that Collins is probably not even going to be active for the game. So,
got it. Yeah. So looking at the wide receiver unit, I gotta tell you here, Keith, a year ago with this same unit, these top 4 guys, I thought this unit was a joke last year. At the beginning of last year, I should say, with Doug Baldwin, Jermaine Kearse, Tyler Lockett, and Paul Richardson. Nobody's laughing anymore. Doug Baldwin, Pro Bowl caliber year. Jermaine Kearse continued to improve. And Lockett makes the Pro Bowl as a returner and as that speed threat. Paul Richardson can slip on the field. So should we expect the Seahawks to spread out the field here in this game, or have them go more in that traditional 2 wide receiver set?
You're going to see a lot of 3 wide receivers going on. The team doesn't have a fullback. They technically do, but he's a defensive tackle, and so you're going to, in terms of that aspect of the of the offense this week. So that opens it up. Plus, you've got Jimmy Graham, who we're still unsure if he's actually even going to play. The rookie Nick Van Ette. Well, I guess we'll talk about tight ends in a minute, but he's also hurt. So they're banged up at tight end. You're going to see a lot of receivers just because that's what they have healthy and ready to go. Are they going to spread it out and throw it 40 or 50 times like New England? No, that's not who they are. They're going to run it. But what you're going to see, you'll still see a lot of 3 or 4 receiver sets with Wilson and one of the running backs in the shotgun, and they'll run out of that formation. So spreading teams out defensively just makes life easier for them to run it. So that's one of the things that the Seahawks really like to do offensively. It'll be Luke Wilson, who will get the start at tight end. I guess he is listed on the depth chart as the starter, which was kind of unexpected. We figured he'd be listed as injured. We don't know if that means he's going to play or not. Even if he plays, he's not going to play a lot. He might start, but I wouldn't expect him to be in the field much. Luke Wilson's going to get the bulk of the snaps. You're going to see Brandon Williams, who is the 4th tight end on the roster. He's going to come in mostly as a blocker, but he has some good movement skills. So he'll get some snaps as well, but he'll mostly be in there in that the heavy patterns.
Moving along to the offensive line, which you were about to touch on earlier, I got to be honest with you. When we first heard that the Dolphins were playing the Seahawks in week 1, it was kind of a bummer because the Seahawks are such a good team heading into the year. But then looked at the offensive line and we're like, wow, the Dolphins' strength is supposed to be their defensive line. We've been salivating over this matchup from left to right. Bradley Sowell at left guard, at left tackle, Glowinski at left guard, Justin Britt at center, first-round rookie Jermaine Ifedi at right guard, and Gary Gilliam at right tackle. Should we be salivating?
Somewhat, because this unit is young, it's inexperienced. From last year's starting five to this year, the only player that's the same in the same position as Gilliam, and his hold on that position is tenuous at best. There's play the whole game there, even if he's healthy, because they'll work Jamarcus Webb in and get him a few series here and there at that spot. So that'll tell you kind of how the shakeup went. Now, people look at that and they go, "Oh, all that, they're throwing everything out. This unit's going to be bad." Well, the reason why they decided to do this massive shakeup was because the offensive line was terrible last year. It was just absolutely terrible. And so they had to do something, and it ended up being a little bit more drastic than they expected. But in this case, change is going to be bad because it's not, the line won't get worse, literally that bad. As it's worked out, looking at preseason and stuff we've seen, Justin Britt, who was a well below average right tackle and one of the worst left guards in the league the last 2 years, really good at center. Like, surprisingly good. Like, everyone, like all of us, the analysts and stuff for Seattle we've been just really, really shocked. Like, we expected him to be the weak length, and he's so far been ranked. So I think he may be better than expected. And the two new guards have both been great. Now, one's a rookie, one's a second-year player who only had made one start as a rookie. So there's going to be mistakes. It's what happens. There's a learning curve in the NFL. And so there's going to be mistakes by those two, but they've held their own really well and opened holes for the running game and done a good job. So the interior of the line has so far looked like it could be okay. Like like I said, there's going to be mistakes made, but they're still a good unit. The tackles though are a mess, and that's where teams are gonna be able to get to Seattle. Sewell is a backup caliber talent. He was a backup in Arizona, and he's sort of starting left tackle. Gilliam is a nice piece, but he's not anything special. He has the quick feet to become a good player. They thought he was going to be the left tackle this year, but he got hurt. He missed the first couple of weeks of camp and never really recovered. So he's going back to the right side. And both of those guys are guys that are going to get beat. You're going to see teams attack the edges of Seattle because they know they can get around the corner.
Absolutely. And, it sounds like, and what I saw in the preseason looks like the Seahawks offensive line from left to right. I'm like, who? First round pick, who? And then I watch them play, and it seems like they were playing above their talent level. And I would expect to Russell Wilson, because he's around so well, the expectation is that he's going to create some opportunities and some time for himself. All the great quarterbacks can do that. The Tom Brady's, the Aaron Rodgers, the Peyton Mannings, and historically are able to buy some time for themselves because they can get the ball out of their hands quickly. And Russell Wilson, you add the wheels onto that, you add the vision onto that, and it makes it that much better. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, Keith, we're not salivating over this matchup. The Dolphins offensive line, which we're a little bit more impressed by this year so far with the addition of Laramie Tunsil, going up against the Seahawks defensive line, specifically had the defensive ends Cliff Averill, Michael Bennett, who combined for 19 sacks and 4 forced fumbles last year. Is this still the bread and butter of your defensive line? Or obviously of your defensive line, but really of your defense in general?
I wouldn't say that. I would give the nod to the secondary, but the defensive line group is really solid. There's some depth issues, but which shouldn't actually play in to the game much here in week one, but down the stretch it could. Averill and Bennett are good. They're both Pro Bowlers. Bennett moves inside in the nickel, and they bring in either Frank Clark or Cassius Marsh at the opposite end from Averill. And what you end up with there is 3 good pass rushers. And Seattle, they get sacks, and it's what they do. They're very disruptive. They also have a tendency to go cold and go long stretches without getting pressure, and then all of a sudden they'll be back and, they'll get 3 sacks in 2 drives and, shut an offense down. But it's those cold periods that they're there because of the lack of inside pass rush other than Bennett. So if Bennett lined up at defensive end, they struggle to get a push up the middle, and so quarterbacks just step up and eliminates Averill from the play. So it's a strength because the top of the depth chart's really good, but once you get down into the depth a little bit, there's a little bit of some issues there for the Seahawks.
And Dolphins fans are going to be shocked to see Tony McDaniel starting for the Seahawks at defensive tackle. There's an interesting story attached with that. I can't remember exactly what it was, and he'll be platooning, I believe, with second-round pick Jarran Reed. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it is. So here's the story. So McDaniel was in Miami. He got, I think he got cut by the Dolphins, signed with Seattle, was here for 2 years, and then the Seahawks had him in a salary cap move, and he played, I think, for New Orleans last year, and then it was on a 1-year deal. So he was a free agent and sat out there, was completely no one was particularly interested in him. He's just out there. And he was up near Seattle in a place called Leavenworth, which is up in the mountains, a little back. And his agent saw him Snapchat some pictures of the mountains up there, realized how close he was to Seattle, called the team and said, "Hey, he's still in shape and he's there. Why don't you guys give him a workout and see?" And so they figure it out. They bring him in. He works out. They're like, "Hey, this is the same guy we had that started for us for 2 years. Let's get him signed." They signed him, and he came out. And he played in his first preseason game 2 days after signing, and looked like he had been with the team from the start of camp. And he's going to be starting and rotating with Jarran Reed. Jarran Reed will be the starter, and he would be if he was fully healthy, but he's been dealing with some nagging injuries, and so McDaniel's going to start and get some time there, which, he's a good player. He's huge. Very good run stuffer. Doesn't offer as far as the pass rush, but in Seattle's defensive scheme, he was a starter for 2 years, and the team likes him. So he just really fits what they do.
Yeah. Looking at the linebacker unit, you'll be hard-pressed to find 2 linebackers better than K.J. Wright and Bobby Wagner on NFL rosters. That third linebacker spot, Mike Morgan, it looks more like a 2-down type of player. Kind of came out of nowhere. Is he somebody that has a big role on the team, or is it kind of like, we play third cornerback so often?
Yeah, they're going to play the nickel, bring in the third cornerback probably about 66% of the time, so about 2/3. So that means that Morgan's going to play about 1/3 of the snaps. And that was why when Bruce Irvin left in free agency, the Seahawks didn't bother to draft or sign anyone to replace it, because it's just not a big role in Seattle's defense. They asked the strong side linebacker to cover a tight end or set the edge against the run, and that's it. It's pretty simple rule.
Sure.
They don't use it all that often. Only about 1/3 of the snaps. And Morgan's he's a veteran. He's a guy that's been here. Every year it seems that the team wants to replace him, and every year he makes the roster. And then this year they finally, just gave up and let him start. So he's an interesting player, as far as athletically and that kind of stuff. But he's, just another guy, and he'll do his job, and that's all they need him to do.
So looking at the bread and butter of the Seahawks defense, you have Richard Sherman at cornerback. In one spot, you have Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas, Pro Bowl caliber safeties. And then on the other side, you have either Deshaun Shedd or Jeremy Lane at that other cornerback spot. And then as the 6th defensive back, a player that I really liked when he was here in Miami, Kelsey McRae. Give us a breakdown of that secondary and what we can expect.
I think everyone kind of knows what to expect from Sherman, Thomas, and Chancellor. Those guys they're all 3 of them have been either first or second team All-Pro. They're the makings of the best secondary in the NFL, and I know Arizona and a couple other teams will dispute that, but they're at least in the conversation. The far side, opposite of Sherman, they're two very different players. Jeremy Lane's good against smaller, quicker guys, the Julian Edelmans of the world, but he doesn't have the length that the Seahawks like on the outside, which is helpful since they play so much cover 3. So that's why he moves inside, and Deshaun Shedd comes in and plays on the boundary. He is a guy that can play both safety and corner, and so him being able to come in and be a starter last year when they needed him to was kind of a revelation. He was always that backup that they trusted because he could do multiple positions, but then he stepped in and played, and that was, kind of a cool thing for him because he just was much better than anyone really expected him to be. And he will get that those snaps on the far side. McCray was a guy that Seahawks traded for because he is a special teamer, and that's who they got. And then once he got into town, they realized, wow, this guy can really run. He's speed, he's got good instincts, and they just keep trying to find ways to get him on the field. And in the offseason, the Seahawks brought back cornerback Brandon Browner and talked about moving him to safety, and then they're going to run 3 safeties at times and use what they call the bandit package, which is 2 cornerbacks and 3 safeties. That transition never really worked, but they haven't thrown the bandit package out. They're just going to use McCray in that package instead. So you're going to see the Seahawks mix up a lot of different things in the secondary. Defensive coordinator Chris Richard he just keeps talking about all the different things he's going to do, and all the different ways to disguise coverage in different packages, and we can't keep up with everything because, of course, he's not going to give us exact details, but you can tell he's been excited with the variety of talents that the Seahawks have given him. And so you've got a really good group there.
I'll tell you, the reason Brandon Browner's not on the team is because he's probably the worst defensive back I've ever seen based on last year with the New Orleans Saints. I know he was great with Seattle a few years ago when he was the 4th man of that Legion of Boom, but man, oh man, this guy had no shot last year. And when Seattle signed him, I thought, okay, maybe he can rekindle some of that magic, but I'm glad that he didn't end up making the roster. Give that opportunity to see some younger players. So great analysis, great breakdown. I'll keep going.
I was going to say, with him, he had no business trying to cover an NFL wide receiver anymore, and he just does not have the speed. And if he couldn't maul them at the line of scrimmage, he had no hope. And that's how he ended up leading the entire NFL in penalties last year. So you're right. I would agree with you. It's probably a better thing that a younger player got an opportunity.
Yeah, so great breakdown of the roster. Really gives some clarity to us Miami Dolphins fans who don't really have the opportunity to look in the NFC West all that often. Looking at the matchup in general here, Keith, what are some matchups that you think that the Seahawks can really exploit against the Dolphins?
Well, I think that Seattle's got enough weapons between their big 4 wide receivers. I say big, even though all of them are short. Jimmy Graham, if he plays, if not, Luke Wilson, Procise out of the backfield. They've got a lot of weapons, and I'm not sure that Miami has the athletes to cover them, especially guys like Paul Richardson and Tyler Lockett and their elite speed and ability to stretch the defense, and that just opens up more space underneath for guys like Doug Baldwin. And so I think that they're going to, if they don't get pressure on Wilson, it could be a long game for that Miami secondary. The other thing is that you have to contain Wilson. You've got to keep him from doing too much when the plays break down. And I know that Miami's defensive line is very talented, but if they start chasing Wilson all over the field, they're going to get tired because it's just those big 300-pounders should not be chasing a little guy like Wilson too much. And if they start to get tired, then Seattle's going to just be able to run over them with Christine Michael and Thomas Rawls and those guys. So there's potential here for a fairly high-scoring second half for Seattle.
So Keith, the flip side of that, what matchups in this game actually worry you as somebody that follows the Seahawks in terms of what you think Miami may be able to exploit in this one?
Well, what I'm looking at with this is when you got guys like Cameron Wake and those guys coming off the edge against Bradley Sowell, especially, I think that Wilson's going to get sacked a bunch. If the over-under for sacks is probably 4.5, which sounds like a lot, but not if you're a Seattle fan and you're kind of used to that. And so that's the matchup that I'm most worried about. The other thing is we don't really know what Miami's offense is going to look like. We kind of have an idea from the preseason, but let's face it, it's very vanilla. They're not going to show their hand. And I expect Case to have some interesting packages and, stuff drawn up for this game. And, possibly even getting Tannehill moving, and not having any idea how to, what's coming means they're not going to may not have a great game plan on how to stop it right away. So there's a little bit of that. Plus, the way Seattle's defensive scheme is set up, the dink and dunk passing game tends to eat them alive, and I can see Miami's receiving core doing pretty well against Seattle soft cover 3 zone and being able to really exploit some of those linebackers. I mean, the linebackers are good, but those zones and underneath as far as coverage, they're not that quick. So I could see there being some really, really easy gains, especially early on. Being able to pick up those first downs when you think that 3rd and 10 and stuff, but it should be a low percentage. I could see them actually getting a higher percentage than normal. It's just a scheme issue, in the way the matchups work.
Looking at this game, what is your final prediction for the Dolphins versus Seahawks this Sunday in Week 1?
It's weird to say because with Seattle, you tend to think of low-scoring games because of the way their defense plays and the way the offense is, run first and slow the game down kind of thing. So there's a lot of low-scoring games. But I actually think this game is going to end up with a fairly decent scoreline, just because I think that Seattle's offense will wear down Miami's defense in the second half because of Wilson's ability to just run around, and guys like Sue and Wake and Williams will get tired, and then that's when the running game gets going, and that's when they start scoring points. So I could see Seattle coming, keeping everyone expecting them to be close early. Seattle's probably going to struggle to move the ball offensively in the first quarter, and then eventually they get things rolling and they pull out a win. So I would predict something like 27-24, something like that, for the Seahawks.
So, Keith, I just want to jump in real quick. One thing that you mentioned a couple of times was the defensive line getting tired. Reports, and you were referencing Cameron Wake specifically. Reports actually included something that we've been saying they most likely do all preseason anyhow, where essentially Jason Jones is really going to be in there on rundowns, and Cam Wake's only going to come in those pass situations to keep him fresh. So that may alleviate a little bit of that for Cam Wake.
So yeah, there should be a lot of rotation. I don't know how Miami does it as far as their rotation, but like Michael Bennett plays the most snaps of anybody in Seattle's defensive line rotation, and it works out to be about 75% of the snaps. What that means, they rotate him a lot in order to try and keep him fresh. So there should be a lot of that. I just think that it's just something that we see, and we, especially with veteran defensive tackles, is that they just are playing against Seattle and playing against Wilson. It tends to be a thing where you look at them in the fourth quarter and they are just completely gassed, even if they've been dominating and Seattle's offense hasn't been doing anything. A good example would be against the Vikings last year in the playoffs, and you start to see guys like Linval Joseph, who was just had a great game. It was just dominating Seattle's interior line, but by the end of the game, he just had nothing left, and that was part of the reason why the Seahawks were able to come back in that and pick up the win.
Thank you very much for joining us here in previewing the Seahawks-Dolphins game. Keith Myers, follow him on Twitter at MyersNFL. His website is 12thManRising. And if there's any way that we can return the favor, Keith, please let us know, okay?
Absolutely.
All right, that will do it for our Dolphins Seahawks preview. And you can follow us on the FinSide on Facebook, on Twitter. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can tweet your questions to #FinSideQ. Solo D, take us home.
It ain't the left side or the right side, then it must be the FinSide. It ain't the left side or the right side, then it must be the FinSide.
Listen, Dolphins fans across the land all tuning in to see what Brian, Cat, and Paul about to do again. We rep our team, you can't change, stop, or ruin it. All we need is to figure what to do to win. Fins Radio, live and direct. Win or lose, we showing up for every contest. No puppet talk, it's all raw and unfiltered. Voice of the fans when the season looks peculiar. Rockin' apple orange over here, then you familiar. Every week they coming through our speakers to fulfill the crave we have to hear about our team and all the latest news. Vets the rookies trying to make the team, paying dues. Current players and alumni interviews. City to city, state to state, follow the moves. Call the hotline, Dolphins talk set to go. Best sports team and show all across the globe.
It ain't the left side or the right side, and it must be the FinSide. It ain't the left side or the right side, and it must be the FinSide. It ain't the left side or the right side, and it must be the FinSide. It ain't the left side or the right side, and it must be the FinSide.
Who that?
So low, so low, so low, deep. So low, so low, so low, deep.